So the research sought to look at the governance implications of what we consider to be the complex environment in which we find ourselves today and the challenges that ensue from this complexity. So essentially, what I try to do is to take the COVID-19 pandemic as an example of what is commonly referred to as the wicked problems that have become characteristic of the period of complexity and unpredictability that we find ourselves today, and to look at the governance implications of this complexity in the context of the SADC region. And essentially, from my research, what I found is that even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the SADC region has been grappling with issues of governance, in the sense that this is one region that, despite the numerous and mounting challenges that it is confronted with, the capacity to be able to navigate these challenges has been declining considerably. So what has the pandemic then highlighted in terms of the governance capacity of the region? It is that just as with other parts of the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that the state is here to stay, and that we've seen what has been referred to as the return of the state as a significant actor in global affairs. But the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of a state are we dealing with, particularly in the context of the Southern African region? And I make the submission that we're dealing with a state that may be asserting itself, but it is equally a hollow and weak state, one that is cohesive on the one hand, but on the other hand, it doesn't really have the capacity to be able to assume the core functions of a state. And increasingly, we're looking at a state as demonstrated by the many examples of how the different countries or different governments in the region have sought to respond to the pandemic. We've seen a state that is increasingly being alienated from the society. And this means that it has relied on cohesion and on a state security paradigm in order to be able to manage the pandemic. And there is a strong possibility that this will carry on even into the post-pandemic period. But importantly, I mean, what the pandemic has highlighted in terms of the governance capacity of the states in Southern Africa is also the preponderance of corruption in our state institutions that continue to undermine this institution to play the role that they've been designed to play. Throughout this period, we've seen corruption arising in many of the states in Southern Africa, which actually curtailed the ability of governments to respond decisively to the pandemic. But in addition to corruption, there is also the element of the fact that the government in the region have not been able to act in an agile and flexible and efficient manner. And these are all attributes that are required for effective governance in the period of complexity. And if we move away from the state level to the supranational level, we also observe that despite the veneer of SADC trying to project itself as an institution that was trying to coordinate the affairs of the member states, what the pandemic pointed out is that there is a clear mismatch between the aspirations of SADC to create a regional security and developmental community and the actual design of the institution. That on the one hand, SADC professes to assume a role to actually coordinate the affairs of Southern Africa and create a security community. But on the other hand, the SADC Secretariat does not have the powers to actually play this role. And we saw this during the pandemic, that the SADC Secretariat will be saying one thing, but member states will be saying another thing. The responses of the SADC member states do not take into account the imperative for a regional approach to dealing with a pandemic. So in the paper, I make the case for the adoption of an anticipatory governance framework in the post-COVID dispensation to be able to position SADC as a region and its member states and individual SADC countries to deal with future complex challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you understand anticipatory governance as a systems approach that combines the capacities for forecasting, visioning, as well as collaborative and participatory processes, then there has to be some preconditions for such an approach to governance to be effective in the SADC region. So the first precondition for an effective anticipatory governance framework in the SADC region is the need to construct healthy state-society relations. Because as the pandemic has demonstrated, the government might adopt a paternalistic and coercive approach, but without the buy-in and support of the larger society, such measures, such as the case with social distancing, will not be effective. So there is need to build healthy state-society relations, as well as social cohesion within the different SADC societies, because you cannot have effective anticipatory governance in societies that are not at peace with themselves. The second precondition is the need to be able to create policy processes that are agile and flexible and responsive to the needs. I make the recommendation that we need to look into the electoral processes in the SADC region, such that the outcome of elections will bring into power governments and representatives that are not reluctant to engage with the people, and that are also in a position to be accountable to the people who have put them there. Because currently we have a situation where after elections, there is little accountability to the electorate. And those who have been entrusted with the power to serve the people, they seem to be scared of the very people who put them there. So they are, in a sense, alienated from the people who put them and the people they are supposed to serve. So we need a new kind of politics and ethics that promotes accountability and constructive engagement. And the third precondition is the need for a public service that is well capacitated, a public service that is also accountable. And we're talking here about a public service that also embraces a good work ethic. And in order for that to take place in the SADC region, there is need for merit-based appointment, because if you do not appoint people based on the merits and the skills that they do have, then they become, co-opted into the politics of factionalism, and that makes it difficult for the public service to assume the key role that it's supposed to play to be able to help society navigate complexity and unpredictable challenges. And I also argue in the paper that there's equally a need to continuously upskill the public service in the SADC region, particularly in giving public servants the skills to be able to apply a futures-oriented approach to policy making and governance broadly. And the final precondition that I believe is significant for an effective anticipatory governance framework in the SADC region is a need to strengthen the regional governance capacity. And by this, I mean that SADC as an institution needs to be strengthened. Because if you have a strong regional organization, it is able to strengthen the governance capacities of other entities at the state level, but also at the sub-state and even at the local level. But currently, SADC cannot play that because it is not designed to play such a role. So there is an urgent need to strengthen the institutions of SADC so that a regional governance system will emerge with the adaptive capacity to be able to lead the region and different sectors or different actors in the region to be able to better navigate the challenges that the region is faced with. And for this to be effective, I believe that regional champions like South Africa should play a key role. And of course, being a champion for regional integration must not necessarily be something that should be left to state actors. But I think that state actors, because of the resources that they command and the legitimacy that they command, they have a significant role to play here. And I think South Africa in particular can play a key role to be able to revitalize the institutions of SADC and position the organization in such a manner that it is able to play a good and effective role in strengthening the governance capacity of the countries in the region. So when I talk of the need for a new politics and ethics in the region, we're talking about the need to have a crop of leaders who understand what it means to be a leader, as someone who is at the service of those who have elected them into office. And we're talking here of an ethics that puts service at the center of anything else. Because as a public official, you should understand that you've been elected to serve the people, to help the people navigate the challenges that they are confronted with, and not to serve your own parochial interests or those of your immediate family or circle. Rather, the kind of politicians that we're talking here are people who understand that the service is first and foremost to the broader society that have entrusted them with the responsibility and the authority to act on their behalf. And it's not just about the need to be conscious of what is required of you, your responsibility, and the need to be accountable to those who put you in power, but we also need a crop of leaders that are skilled in being able to discern the challenges that our society is confronted with, and they have the predisposition to be able to engage with other actors at multiple levels to seek solutions that are not restricted to a particular circle, because you also need certain skills to be able to manage diverse interests and to resolve conflicts, because the kind of challenges that the region, like the rest of the world, is confronted with are challenges that, because they are interrelated, they bring about conflict between different segments in society. So you need people with these skills and the insight to be able to also mediate between these conflicting interests in order to come up with policies and solutions that will try to carry everyone on board. Of course, it wouldn't be in all situations that the policies that are adopted will satisfy all interests, but you should have a leader that is able to mitigate whatever dissatisfaction that emerges from policies that do not serve certain constituencies.